good day to the whole audience. So what we've got is some time today to talk around Sharperlight and how Sharperlight can work and interact and facilitate reporting with SAP Business One. There's a couple of key topics which I'll be talking about. So I'll be talking about self-service reporting, which is a bit of a catch-cry nowadays. I'll be talking about how Sharperlight can interact within Excel, which I guess for a lot of finance people and accountants, Excel is a common tool that they use, currently, and Sharperlight allows people to interact in Excel with live data. And I'll also talk about the concept of Drilldown. So with Sharperlight, there's a concept we have with we can drill into information, we can drill down, we can drill through. So they're the three key things that I'm going to talk about today. So self-service reporting, the actual Sharperlight Excel add-in, and drill down. If you can see my screen, you can obviously see I'm running Excel, and you can see that I've got a Sharperlight Excel ribbon up. And basically, Sharperlight loads into Excel as an add-in. So it will work in every version of Office from 2003 all the way up to 2016. And it will appear as a ribbon. It won't appear as a ribbon in 2003 because they didn't have ribbons there. But pretty much it's the same functionality in every consistent release. And we've tried to do that just to make sure that our client base gets a consistent feel and interface. Now, getting back to the concept of self-service reporting is there's a lot of reporting tools on the market. A lot of people talk about, empowering the end users, making it easy for them to actually pull information out and interact with it and make, basically get information to make decisions. The real challenge is A, the tool sets are generally quite technical, quite complicated, and B, it's hard for people to actually interact with the underlying data because in a lot of cases they may understand how a system works, but they don't actually understand the data structure. So what Sharperlight does is it basically encapsulates the complexity of the underlying data model, or the system, the database, and they turn it into what we call the data model, which is effectively a reporting layer. So let's have a look at that reporting layer. So I'm just going to open up my little query screen, and what you can see in front of you here is what we call the query builder. So within Sharperlight there is one common query interface. It's used throughout the whole suite, and it's designed to query these data layers, these data models, and allowing you to pull information out of an underlying system and bring it back, in this case, to present it into Excel. Now it'll make a little bit more sense when I actually select a table. So what you can actually see here is the filter, the selection, the output of the query screen. So pretty much I can define where I want to get the data from. I then have a selection list of all the fields that exist in relation to that table that I've selected, and then there's an output pane where I can actually say, okay, I've got these fields, I would like to output these fields to be then extracted into Excel. Okay. Now, the easiest way to illustrate it is to show you, and then I'll come back and explain some of the concepts around it. So at the moment, I've just picked a very simple table, which is the GL transactions table out of SAP Business One. I'm going to go for the standard UK demo database, and I'm just going to build a very, very simple query. I'm not going to spend too much time talking about how I'm filtering it, but I'll explain the concepts of what I'm outputting. Okay. So the first thing is I just want to keep the actual query quite simple. So I'm only going to output a range of accounts. So I've got a filter here which actually says, okay, what are the account numbers in this database? And if I select an account range, and let's say I'll do a very small range of accounts just to keep it simple. So I've got little lookups where I can actually click on it like I did there. I can also type in my filter values. So I know one of the standard reporting periods for the demo database is, let's say, do 6. Okay, so I've put in a couple of filters, and then I want to have a couple of fields that I output. I want to keep it simple, so I'm just going to output my account code, so my GL account code, and what I would like is also my account name. So I'm going down here, I'm going to pick up the account name out of the chart of accounts table. And I'm going to pick that up and I'm just going to drop it into the output pane. And the last thing I'm going to output is an amount field. Okay, so pretty much what I've done is I've selected a table, I've updated a couple of filters, and I've outputted a couple of fields. And I can actually, from here, within this query builder, I can actually hit the preview pane, and it's actually querying it on the fly and actually showing me a preview of the information before I extract it into Excel. So for the moment, let's say I'm happy with that, and I'm just going to hit OK. And what it's going to do in Excel, it's actually going to create a formula that is linked to a table. So we've got a formula there, and we've got a table underneath it, which is actually extracting the data. And I can actually just make it a little bit wider, just so you can actually see it a little bit better. So pretty much that formula is actually generating that table. And if I double click on that formula, it'll open up the same query again. So you can actually go in and actually change that query and modify it, change the filter criteria and add additional filters and things like that. What I can also do, which is a logical sort of thing to do in Excel, is to link it to the underlying sheet. So let's say, for example, I want to filter it based on a cell reference. So I'm just going to sheet and grab my filter values. I'm just going to paste them into the sheet. And I'm actually going to select the value. I'm going to double click on it. And what you can see there is I'm double clicking it. It's actually picking up the cell reference and it's passing in the value that's actually in that cell. So where it was hard coded into the query, it's now linked to the underlying sheet as a cell reference. And if I hit OK now, it's still producing exactly the same result because I haven't changed the filters, but you can actually see in the formula is now linked to these related cells, these reference cells. Now the big advantage of that is that if I go in here and change, let's say for example the period, I'll make period 2, you can actually see that that formula is actually taking in the change of the period and it's actually refreshing the data. Okay. Now, the key sort of premise here is these formulas behave like normal Excel formulas. So they refresh the data. Anytime you change an input cell, it actually uses automatic recalculation and refreshes it. Okay. So that's just a little bit of a starter. Let's go in and just explain this in a little bit more detail. So really, what are we doing? What we're doing is accessing a representation layer of SAP Business One. Now, this representation layer covers the financials. You've also got, your sales opportunities. You've got your sales and your purchasing. So each of these objects that you can actually see here, they may be a table. In a lot of cases, they are tables in their own right. Some of them are actually effectively a construct. We've built something and joined it together and created something so you can interact, which you natively can't do within the table structure that exists. And it goes all the way down to covering, your banking, your production. It also allows you to handle, let me just change the company for a second. I'll just jump up here. Here we go. So if your SAP Business One database has user-defined tables in it, this data model will actually see those user-defined tables and actually make them available through this presentation layer. It'll do the same thing with user-defined fields, so you can actually interact with it. And getting back to what I mentioned very early on about self-service, simplified self-service sort of reporting, it's this concept that what we're trying to do with the data model is simplify somebody's take-up and introduction to reporting over SAP Business One so that we've built all these components actually into the data model. So all you need to do is point it at a database and it will actually pick these up automatically. And that's a key element of making it self-service, because you don't have to sit down and think about, how do I get these user-defined tables that we've spent time creating? They're in the data model. Once they've been created within SAP Business One, they're there and available, just like the user-defined fields. So the data model, as it's seen there as a representation, basically defines the structure. Now, the structure of the table is also made up of all the underlying fields in the database. So this selection list that you actually see here down on the left-hand side, they're all the available fields to do with the GL transactions table. Okay, so you've got the chart of accounts, you've got your journal headers and things like that. So what we've done when we've built the data model, we've put in all the logical fields that people would want to use for reporting purposes. And those fields can be both outputs, they can also be filters. So one of the things you may have noticed is when I select this table, it automatically had the account code as a filter, as we call it, a mandatory filter. So it automatically asks you for the account code. It also automatically asks you for the period. So what we're trying to do is make it easier for the end user so that all the obvious fields that you'd want to filter something by are already in there. So you just pick them up and say, oh, I've got an account code. I then want to go through and actually filter it based on the account numbers in that database. Okay. Now, I talked a little bit about self-service. I talked a little bit about the Excel add-in, just to give you the introduction. And the other element, if you remember, that I talked about was drill down. Now, drill down is very important because you may have a high-level number. So say, for example, I've got my domestic sales here. You've got a high-level number here. But you may want to analyse that further. Now, traditional sort of sense would be, oh, let's just write another report. With drill down, you can actually drill into that line, into that value, into that formula, and analyse it further. So within Sharperlight, it's got intrinsically, it's built with the drill down concept because the data model defines the interrelated data structures. So you can drill into something and say, okay, I'd like to drill based on the partner. And I say, okay, and it goes away and actually slices that information based on the business partner. So you can see here over on the left, we're talking about 276,000, and on the right here, you've got that 276,000 that's sliced into the business partners. So it's basically using the structure, the underlying structure of the system and the data structure to allow you to then drill into it. And you can drill into it multiple times. So you can do a drill within a drill within a drill. So if I wanted to drill based on posting date, I can actually see what transactions relate to which posting date as well. So what you're seeing at the front at the moment is what we call Explorer, which is the integrated drill down tool that you actually get within Sharperlight. And I'll come back to that and we'll be looking at that a couple of times again. Okay. So far we've got a fairly simple little example of a table, a formula being refreshed by a table, and as you saw there, if I actually changed the filter for the period and I refreshed that, it just recalculates it. Okay, so it's using automatic recalculation. What you may also have noticed is I've got the company, so the company's in there as actually a filter, and if I actually click on the cell reference, it'll actually pop up a little lookup of the available companies. So if I was to select one of the other companies, it's going to go away and actually query it. So it's now querying the same account range and the same period range, but for a different company. So the same query can actually be reused across multiple companies. But the other concept that you've got is that you may have multiple companies, multiple databases in SAP Business One, and you'd like to report over all of them or some of them. So what you can do is you can actually multi-select them and you can report over them. You can consolidate over them at the same time. Now, getting back to that concept of self-service, the database structure in SAP Business One, you've got different databases and the query logic can be quite complicated sometimes if you try to join different databases together. But within Sharperlight, the data model's been built to allow you to handle that ease of reporting. So you just say, I want to report this company plus this company, this plus this company. And then it'll allow you to query that data out, whether it be one company or 20 companies. And it will consolidate it on the fly and bring it all back. Now, a key thing that I haven't mentioned so far, but it's important to understand, everything that I'm showing you here will work the same with SQL Server as it will with SAP HANA. So exactly the same interface, you'll interact exactly the same way. It's just you'd connect it to a different data source. And the same reports can actually be moved between systems. So you can go from SQL Server and you can go to HANA, and the same reports in Sharperlight will still work in HANA because it's exactly the same data model. So we've got a very simple example of our table here. One of the other things that we can actually do is, instead of actually outputting large chunks of data as a table, what you can also do is you can return small intersects or single self-contained formulas. So there's a concept in Sharperlight which we call value formulas. So I've selected a slightly different icon on the ribbon, and it's actually at the very top it says it's an aggregation formula. It's an aggregation. But with this, it's a similar sort of formula, but what I'm actually going to do here, and it's exactly the same query builder interface, but with this one, I'm actually going to link it to the account code on the row. I'm going to use the same period as what I used before, and I'm just going to output the amount. I've got one row out, but that's all right. So pretty much that formula there is using the account number in the top row to return the balance of that account. So with the query that you've got on the left, you can bring out large chunks of information, multiple rows, multiple columns, whereas the query on the right can allow you to actually bring out self-contained aggregations or balances of accounts, or the value of purchase orders and things like that. So the formula on the right, it gives you absolute flexibility in how you define it as in an Excel spreadsheet, because you've got complete control down to the cell level, and you can format it however you like. And it gives you the maximum flexibility of using your existing Excel capabilities. So a cell-based formula is really no different to an intelligent sum-if formula. But this is going back to the underlying SAP Business One database, and it's refreshing on every recalculation. So if you force a recalculation, it'll just refresh. Now, so far we've done financials. The same concept as what you've seen with financials works with your purchasing and sales. It's the same concept. It works exactly the same way. It's just you select a slightly different table. So in this case here, I'm going to go for the sales accounts receivable. Now, you may remember before when I was talking about, a lot of these tables are native tables that exist in SAP Business One. Some of them are kind of a construct. This table is a construct. So it actually combines together multiple sales documents. So deliveries, returns, credit notes, sales invoices. So you can actually report all of them together. So in this case here, I'd actually like to report sales invoice and credit notes together. So by selecting that, it'll actually query the two tables together and union them and return the data. Again, I'll keep it pretty simple. So I've selected the company by selecting the cell reference. I'm going to use the same period concept. So it's using the financial periods out of the underlying accounting system. And I'm going to output my customer code and my customer name. And I'm going to output my line amount. And here we go, there's my line amount. Okay. So it's still pretty much the same sort of concept of you've got some filters, you've got a selection list of items, and you can then drag these items out. You can drag and drop on, or you can double click on it and you can just transfer it. I hit OK. And again, exactly the same sort of process that you saw before when I created the table on the left. I'm now doing the same thing with the table on the right, but it's actually bringing out sales information. Okay? And it's still exactly the same drill down concept as well. So if I want to drill into that, let's say, for example, I want to look at the item code information. So I'll go down to the line. So item code and description. Oops, not there. There. And it opens up Explorer, which is my kind of slice and dice tool within Excel. And you can see there, I've drilled into 174,000, and I've now sliced that based on the different items, and there's my 174,000. Now this is a live query and it's a live drill, so it's actually showing you exactly what's in the database here and there. So there's no transition layer. It doesn't go into a cube or anything like that. It's actually a live query. Now, to give you a full understanding of how Sharperlight works, there is a lot more to it, but I will just diverge out a little bit just to make you understand that the same query can be used in a number of different ways. So I'm going to progress on showing some different examples in Excel and talk a little bit more about Drilldown, but I also just want to touch on this concept of taking that query and reusing it. And one of the things you can actually do in reusing a query is you can take it and make it available to a lot of people, not just in Excel. So in this case here, I want to take this query and publish it into the web. So I can select this query, and let's say, for example, I want to push it to the web, and within Sharperlight there's a component we call Publisher. And as the name kind of suggests, it's designed for publishing queries to the web. Okay, and I'm just going to say this is a new query, it's going into Publisher, it's now in Publisher, so that once it's added to Publisher, it's actually available in the web. And if I open up my web browser and I go to my index page, so this is the kind of a common landing page for Sharperlight. It's just going to pull off a list of reports. So these are reports that have been created. They're actually in the system. Okay, and I'll just scroll down. So that report that I just created there is this report in the web browser. And if I click on it, you've got the filters that we had in the query builder. And I hit submit, and it actually shows you a web representation of that same report. And this kind of touches in the overarching sort of concept of self-service, that you can build a report, it can be reused, but it can basically be reused in a number of different ways. So if you've got a report down here in Excel and you want to then make that available to a large group of people, rather than emailing it around to people, you know, it's that ability in Sharperlight that you can take the same query and publish it to the web, and you can then groom it, you know, you can change, you can remove certain filters, you can structure it, you can add logos and things like that around to it in a web browser, and it makes it available to a much larger audience. But they still get the ability to change the filters if you allow them. So the same filter concept as what you're seeing in Excel exists here. So you can actually change the filters in the web, and you can actually refresh that query. So it's not a snapshot, it's actually a live query being rendered in the web. And that report there would work in any sort of web browser, it'll work on a smartphone, it'll work on a tablet. Anyway, so just wanted to make you aware of that, because it's a bit of a misnomer to think it's just an Excel-based reporting tool. It actually does a lot more, and the web side of it and dashboarding will be covered in the next seminar. Anyway, getting back to this. So we've got our example reports here, some very simple sort of examples, and in this context, you know, Sharperlight can be used as like an ad hoc reporting tool. Somebody can ask a question and you can very quickly go in there and actually just pull out the information and then email it off to people. The other way that Sharperlight can be used within Excel is it can be used as a financial reporting, a presentation sort of tool. So in this example here, I've got a workbook with a number of different styles of reports, just illustrating how you can use Excel as a reporting tool. And in a lot of respects, you're leveraging your existing skill sets and knowledge of how to use Excel. So you've still got a formula. So I've actually got a Sharperlight formula here, and I'm linked to these filter cells on the left-hand side. And if I actually double-click on these filter cells, they'll actually show me a lookup. So these lookups are actually coming out of the data model. So pretty much when you link a query to a cell in Excel, it actually goes, oh, well, if you double-click on it, show me the valid lookup, the logical lookup that exists. And if I change, say, for example, the code, it's actually going to go away and refresh. So it's using the automatic recalculation. So I'm changing that cell and it's going, oh, I've got to recalculate this sheet. Okay? So you can build structure, you can have filters on the side, you can build a layout. The other key thing that you can do, and certainly, you know, one of the key reasons why people use Excel is the fantastic charting capabilities. So with Sharperlight, you can actually output the data, so the data can be Sharperlight data populated into a table, and then you can chart directly over the top of it. You know, so where people traditionally are hard coding these values, with Sharperlight you can just put a Sharperlight table formula, which is extracting the data, and you can chart directly over the top of it. So it makes your life a lot easier. You change the filter criteria, it refreshes on the fly. So it can be as easy as every month when you're doing a financial report pack, you just change the period, recalculate the sheet, and hey presto, you've got this month's report pretty much done. Getting back to the concept that I mentioned before in relation to drill down, and I mentioned the term drill through. Now, in Sharperlight terminology, drill down is on the fly, follow your nose sort of analysis. I don't know what I want to know until I want to know it. And you can pretty much drill into something on the fly within Excel and slice it up as you go. Drill through is quite a different sort of concept, and drill through follows through into the web as well. It's quite important in the web, in fact. Drill through is a concept where you actually define the drill path. So you save the drill. So if I just open up the query that relates to this little table here, you can actually see I've got a little icon, a little button appearing here. That tells me that there are actually some drill throughs associated to this query. And if I click on it, so there is one drill through by document date. And if I wanted to look at the drill through, I could go in and I could edit the query and I could actually see the query that makes it up. But I just wanted to show you the fact that there is a drill through on it. Now, going back to this little menu here, when you have associated a drill through to a query, it actually appears alongside the standard drill downs, it'll appear as a saved drill path. And with a drill through, you can actually select it and it takes you straight to that slice. Now, there's no limit to the number of drill throughs you build. So if you've got a report and you find that people analyze it in a specific sort of way, you can select it and you can drill straight to the bit that they find interesting. Now, the interesting concept about drill through, it's not restricted to the seed query. So you could drill across systems. So I want to go from sales back to the GL or GL to the sales. So you can drill through, you can drill across, because they're treated as distinct queries. Okay. And that sort of capability, you can actually build a reporting structure that you give to somebody else. They may not necessarily know how to build queries, but they've got that ability to follow those drills. So it provides a way of actually packaging up a reporting layer and a bit of knowledge within Excel, giving to somebody else and just say, recalculate this sheet, run this report. If you have an issue, double-click on the cell and drill into it. One of the ones that I touched on before was this idea of a cell-based formula. So this little financial report here is made up of cell-based formulas. So all the formatting is just Excel formatting. So shades, colors, lines, all that sort of stuff. But effectively, it is just a Sharperlight formula that's returning the balance of an account. And as you can see what we did previously, there is a drill through associated to this query. So whether it's a table or a cell-based formula, you can still have a drill through on it. You know, the concept flows through. In this case here, there's actually two drill throughs. So there's one drill to go to date, and there's another drill that goes to the posting details. So with this case here, if I double-click on that formula, it opens up the query screen. So to drill into it, from the drill menu, from the Sharperlight menu, there's actually a drill icon. If I click on it, it pops up a little drill menu. So I've got my normal drill down. So drill down is that slice and dice. You can select the fields you want. And these are the pre-built drill throughs. So you can actually select the drill through and go straight to it. So it's basically using the existing drill path to allow you to analyze it further. A very, very powerful tool. And the concept of drill down and drill through, drill down you can go multiple levels, drill through you can go multiple levels. And when you take this query and if you were to take it and put it into the web, the drill throughs are carried forward. So within a web browser you can actually click on a row and you can drill again and drill again and drill again. So the drill throughs follow through in the web. Okay. Next thing to actually show you is, let me just open up my next little one. Here we go. Okay. Now, one of the disadvantages of cell-based formulas is that they're static. So if you create a cell-based formula, certainly like that example that I showed you before, if I go back to this one here, okay, if you create a new account number, and I'm sure I've got my account numbers on the side, yes I do. If I add a new account number, somebody would have to go in here, insert a row, copy the formula down, and then it would balance, and oh, I'm picking up that new account. Now there's a bit of overhead to that, and that might be quite tedious. The other way of actually looking at that and treating that is saying, okay, I have a range of accounts, and I want to dynamically populate the accounts in that range. So if I just go to that example I had before, this is an example of a dynamic report in Excel. So it's made up of individual formulas, so individual, as we call them, value formulas. They're no different to what you saw previously, so there's still a Sharperlight query in the formula, and they're laid out. In this case here, I've broken it up, so it's a trial balance. So I've got my income accounts as a single line, I've got my expenditure accounts as a single line, then I've got my other, and then I've got a retained earnings account, a calculated value. And if I go off to the side, I've got my filters and what my account types are, and there's a special little formula over on the side here, and I'll just open up the standard sort of function wizard in Excel. This split row formula, it's a Sharperlight formula. It uses automatic Excel recalculation, but what it does is if I pass in a range of accounts, it will actually take that row and split it and then inject the account code and the account description on that row. So as it's extracting, it'll actually say, oh, this row will be this account and this description, and the next row will be that account. Now the concept works for anything. So I'm just using accounts, given the fact it's a logical one for a code and a description, but it would work with anything. It could even be, you know, transaction types with a code and a description, things like that. So with this, these split row formulas, what they do is if I recalculate this sheet, it's actually going to take the structure of that row, insert a new row, and change the account code. Now, to avoid confusion and not kind of confusing end user, what we do is we don't modify the parent sheet, we actually create a child sheet. So what you can see here is I've got a template sheet. The child sheet is the sheet that actually gets created. So if I actually create this, if I just recalculate this sheet as it is, the trial balance sheet, the green sheet, will actually disappear, and then it'll suddenly get created again. So what it does, it deletes the original one, creates a new one, then starts inserting rows. So effectively, you may add new rows in from the last time that you actually ran it. It will insert the new rows. It will then recalculate every formula on that row and then go to the next one. Okay. So in this case here, I think there's about 1,000 rows. So it takes a little while as it goes down and actually inserts all the rows, and it'll do a final recalculation at the very end just to make sure that everything actually balances, or everything's current. So the interesting concept about this split rows is, so with Sharperlight, you've got the ability to do split columns and split sheets as well. And it's this concept, they're not so much formulas in their own right that recalculate something, they're actually formulas which automate something. So they automate the splitting of a row, the splitting of a column, or the splitting of the sheet. So you can have a sheet that gets split up into different departments or account segments or things like that. And that's just finished the recalculation while I was actually speaking. You'll notice here that I have rows which have zeros on it. A bit of a pain. And we'd like to remove those. Now we don't necessarily want to delete them, but what we just want to do is suppress them. And actually up in the top corner here is a Sharperlight formula which is designed exactly for that. It will suppress the zero rows. So if I go up here, there's actually a little true false flag. Show hidden rows, at the moment I'm saying true. if I say false, it actually goes through and hides those 0 rows. It actually changes the height of the row. So it doesn't recalculate the sheet, doesn't affect the recalculation logic whatsoever. It just changes the row height so that row is hidden. If I was to recalculate the sheet and a row which had zeros on it suddenly has an amount, that suppress rows formula will actually unhide the row. So it's actually quite smart handling it both ways. Okay, now the split rows and the split sheets, I don't want to go into too much detail with that, but there's part of the standard sort of product. Going back to the actual ribbon, so when we talk about split, we've got a custom task pane which actually help you build those. It's called Splitter. So that's what the splitter icon on our ribbon is. We also have a tree which displays all the different split sheets. So as you can imagine, if I had a workbook with lots of templates and lots of sheets that are then generated, it's useful to have a tree structure so I can actually see. The formulas up here, we've got 3 main formulas within Excel. So we've got the value formula and we've got the table formula. The sheet formula is a little bit different. The sheet formula takes control of the sheet. So it's very similar to a table formula, but it takes control of that sheet. It just gives us a little bit more control in how we actually lay it out. The drill down formula we've actually seen before, so you're already kind of familiar with the drill down. But one of the ones which is probably worth mentioning is write back. So with SAP Business One, there is a SAP BI API for actually writing data back. Now, Sharperlight, in this context, we're talking as a reporting and inquiry tool. Sharperlight can also be a write back tool. So it actually uses the standard SAP API to actually send data back, all within the Excel add-in. So I'll just briefly mention that. So we cover, I think it's about 15 of the standard sort of write backs, the most common ones. So we can actually push that information in using the standard API that SAP Business One provides. And the same interface will work with both SQL Server and SAP HANA as well. Okay, so it's worth mentioning that. Okay, just close that. Yes, close that, close that. Now, one of the interesting things is that people look at this information. Let's just go back to this workbook here. Here we go, this report pack. Now, you've got a workbook with all these formulas, these refreshable formulas, and then people say, okay, well, I want to give that to somebody else. Does that mean they have to have Sharperlight installed? The workbook as it stands has got Sharperlight formulas in it, so if you give it to somebody else, if they don't have the Sharperlight add-in, they can't recalculate the formulas. But if you want to give it to somebody and you pretty much want to remove all the Sharperlight formulas, from the Sharperlight ribbon there is actually an option to detach the formulas. So what it'll do from the workbook, it'll go through and remove all the Sharperlight formulas and basically turn it just to a native Excel spreadsheet with no special formulas whatsoever. You then save it and send it off. The key thing to remember about Sharperlight and its interaction within Excel is we're not changing how Excel works. So we're working very closely with Excel, we adapt and we basically interact with Excel in a very nice loose coupling, and we're not changing its behavior. So you can still do everything that you previously would do in Excel, like pivot tables and things like that, and you can then email those Excel workbooks out to people and they can use it. So they don't have to have the Excel add-in. It's only if they want to refresh it or they want to be able to do the drill down. So the drill down actually uses the Excel add-in. Okay. One of the things that we didn't touch on, but it's worth probably explaining, is very early on when I clicked on it, a little dialog popped up. Now with Sharperlight you have a login. So there are a couple of different styles of security that you can set up. You can have a native Sharperlight login, but more commonly people actually use Windows Authentication or an Active Directory account. So people can then add themselves to, be added to an Active Directory account, and then it'll securely add you into the data model, and you can still add security to different levels of a data model. So you can actually go through and actually say, well, certain people, maybe they can see the financials, but they can't see any of the other folders. So within Sharperlight there is actually a security structure where you can actually define what tables different and what folders different people get access to. Okay. Just as I close that, recalculation, fairly obvious being an Excel add-in. You may also notice here that you've got recalculator range, worksheet and a workbook. You also have the Excel add-in as a right-hand click menu. One of the things just to mention is obviously Office 64-bit is becoming very popular. Sharperlight will work with both a 32-bit version of Office and a 64-bit version of Office. It's got an Excel add-in, a 64-bit Excel add-in. You just use the appropriate add-in for the actual system. With Sharperlight, the way it actually connects and interacts with another system is it's not connecting directly to the database. There is an application server and there's a Sharperlight installation on that. So that connects to the actual underlying database, but Sharperlight actually provides a web service and we connect to that web service. So if I just open this up, okay, so this is just me running the web service on my local machine, but it illustrates quite nicely that Sharperlight has a web service, that's where the web reporting comes out. It also has an API, a direct connection service, which the rich desktop client communicates with. So with Excel, it would traditionally connect to the web service. It would be passing its requests to an app server. That app server would then be querying the underlying database and bringing that data back. So all the database connectivity is actually secured on the database server, and on the client, the minimum amount of traffic is actually happening. And one of the things you find with Sharperlight is you can actually do remote connections to a server. So we have a lot of customers who actually query their systems over the internet because the connection is secured, it's encrypted, and it's password protected at multiple levels. So that can be actually quite an interesting concept in its own right. Okay, just before I close off, I'll just go back and cover off a couple of items which I didn't mention. Let me just go, I'll just go up here. Okay, now one of the things that we've noticed around SAP Business One is you quite often people have, you know, they have a specific reporting requirement, and they may have query scripts or bits of SQL they actually want to run, they currently run and use, and they may want to reuse those. Now with Sharperlight you can actually take those snippets of SQL, you can actually add them into what we call custom tables. So a custom table is really just a query object in its own right, has all its own fields, but it's actually running a bit of SQL in the background, and you have control on how that SQL actually works. So if you've got those fragments of SQL that you use to actually pull out information, in this case here, you know, here we go, changes to the quantity based on the document or the change log or the document log, so it's querying the log file, it'll actually pull out what sales orders have been changed and what quantities have been changed. So if you've got something which is very boutique and does a specific thing based on how you do your business or your organisation, you can still take those queries and put those in Sharperlight, and you still get the benefit of the front end, but using your own little custom bit of query. Okay, so I'm up to 45 minutes. I'll take a breath. Ian? Are you there?
I am, Donald.
Calling, you are there. Okay, so I thought I'd leave a fair chunk of time if we've actually had any questions, and we could go through and just close out some of those questions.
Excellent. Okay. Well, thank you for your presentation this afternoon. We have had a number of questions come through. I think that you may have kind of covered these off in your presentation anyway, but I'll just refer to them just to clarify. The question here: what versions of SAP Business One does Sharperlight work with?
Everything from 8 to 9. So pretty much we've been around for the last 7 years. So we started with 8 and we've been progressively developing it. The same data model works with everything from 8 to 9. and the latest version, and it's SQL Server and HANA as well.
Okay, so that answers the next question nicely. Does Sharperlight work with SQL and SAP HANA? Yes, it does. Okay,
Yes,
does Sharperlight work on mobile versions of Excel?
mobile versions, so two different ways I can interpret that. Versions of Excel on like a Microsoft Surface, that's actually a full version of Excel, so it will work on that as in an add-in. That'll work fine. But if you're talking about Office 365 as in the web version, no it won't, because it doesn't have an add-in. But the flip side of that is that if you want to use a mobile device, our web front end, our web reports is a much better way of delivering it. So decoupling it from Excel and using it as a web report or a dashboard, which I haven't covered, but it's part of the standard product.
Excellent, okay. And does Sharperlight work with all types of browsers?
We test it with IE, Firefox, Chrome and Opera. They're the standard ones we test, but we develop it to be browser agnostic. So we don't have a specific browser that we're tied to. We try to come up with a standard flavor of HTML4 and HTML5, so it'll work on pretty much any Android, iOS sort of web browser. We certainly don't have any problems with different browsers. The only thing you may find is sometimes the rendering of HTML5 that you may find that it's slightly out of skew just because the rendering of it, but it's still quite visible.
Okay. How many standard formulas are there built into Sharperlight?
The standard ones would be 3 for extraction, and there's 4 for automation in Excel.
Okay. A question here from Orla. Would all report users need access to SAP to be able to drill down or drill throughout?
Okay. Because Sharperlight is actually querying directly over the database, it does not actually go into or use the SAP interface to query it. So the technical answer would be no. But then there may well be licensing implications in that. So you'd have to talk to somebody. I'm not an expert about SAP Business One licensing, so you'd have to confirm that. But certainly Sharperlight, there's no restriction on how Sharperlight interacts with the database.
Excellent. Okay. This is an interesting question. We access SAP over Citrix. Does that affect the performance of Sharperlight?
No, not really. We've got a lot of customers around the world that use Citrix. Unfortunately, Excel on Citrix is a resource hog, but that's just the nature of the beast. But Sharperlight works fine because it's developed as .NET. It's .NET 3.5, so we don't really have any problems with Citrix. You just notice that if you're running Office and certainly Excel, you have performance issues. And that's why we generally kind of lead people down the path. If you're just doing reporting, look at the web reporting, look at the dashboarding.
Okay. Question from Chris. You say that Sharperlight works on version 9. Does that include the latest version 9.2?
Yes, it does.
Excellent. Okay. Another question here. What are the minimum PC specifications to run Sharperlight without it freezing?
Okay. There's 2 sets of specifications. If you're running just the web-based reporting and dashboarding, it's much lower because obviously it's just purely a web browser. So, you know, dual core, 4 gigs of RAM, that sort of stuff, you know, pretty basic sort of thing. With Excel, the specs, I would say you'd probably still the same dual or quad core, but you'd probably want to go 5 gig of RAM, because effectively when you're running it within Excel, you're running within the Excel memory space. Now, getting back to freezing, it won't freeze, it'll just take more to run. So the more cores you have, the faster it'll run, because Sharperlight's using the multi-threading of Excel.
Okay. A question here from Jer, sorry if I've pronounced your name incorrectly. How does it cope with big consolidation volumes? How does it compare versus a data warehouse?
Okay. We have a lot of customers that use Sharperlight over the top of a data warehouse. Some of our biggest customers, they'd be talking about probably 3 or 4 trillion transactions. So they're some of our biggest. They use Sharperlight live over the top of those systems. So we handle very large data sets, but we recognize that if you need optimum performance, you need the ability to do aggregation and summarization. So within the standard product, we've got a thing we call materialized queries, which is actually going to be the next seminar, and that is like a data mart wizard. So if we're dealing with a very, very large system which has got lots of transactions and we want optimum performance, you can materialize query sets and actually report over the top of those. So you can avoid having to build a data warehouse if need be. But we are very complimentary of data warehouses. We work over data warehouses. We've even built some ourselves. So it's very much, it's a horses for courses. But our big focus is live reporting, and when it doesn't work, we materialize it using our materialized table concept.
Excellent. Okay, so we are running out of time, so if you do have any more questions, please send those through now for Donald to answer. A couple more questions here. What Sharperlight licenses do I need if my users were to view queries over the web in the way you demonstrated? That's from Chris.
Right, okay. So with the licensing, the desktop client, you're a full user. In the web, there is a license called a web user, which is effectively a read-only user. So they're just looking at web pages. Now, web users are significantly cheaper. So,
okay. And yeah. Donald, just so the attendees know, how many different types of licenses are there associated with Sharperlight?
So you're not talking about products as such, you're just talking about different licensing type styles. There's 2 main licensing, so we pretty much go for a distributed license where it's just tailored to a product, or we go for application licensing. Application licensing is pretty much, you buy licenses and you could use it over multiple products. And application licenses have a split off, so you can have full licenses and you can have web licenses. So traditionally nowadays, the application license is the cheapest solution, and it's the easiest for customers, so they can actually use it in different ways.
Excellent. Okay, and it looks like just one final question from Orla. Can you add other data sources other than SAP, such as Excel sheet with timesheet data?
Yep. So as you know, our business is building reporting solutions over a whole range of different sort of systems. So you can report over Excel, Access, SQL, Oracle, DB2, Teradata. You know, the list goes on and on. Pretty much anything which is has an ADO.NET provider, we can connect to. But we have, I think it's about 25 standard templates for systems that we regularly interact with. And Excel is one of the standard ones.
Excellent. Okay. Well, hopefully that clears that up then. That looks like that's all of the questions for today, Donald. There don't seem to be any further ones coming through. So as Donald mentioned a couple of times during his presentation, we are going to do another seminar, which will be on the date is Thursday the 30th of June. So what we'll do over the coming weeks is we will send you a couple more emails just outlining the different functionality and tools which are available in Sharperlight, and then Donald will demonstrate those. So if you guys would like to keep an eye out for that, or there is a link on our website, milnerbrowne.com, and if you go to the events section you can find it there. And we will also send out a copy of today's recording to everybody who's been on the call as well. So if you do have any other inquiries, feel free to email us at info@milnerbrowne.com, and obviously I'll pass any inquiries on to Donald. Donald, thank you very much for your presentation today. That was excellent.
Thank you. Always nice to spread the word.
Of course. And we will speak to you again on the 30th of June.
Excellent. And yes, see you then.
Excellent. Okay, thanks Donald. Thanks to everyone who joined us.
Thank you. Bye.